Hello and welcome to another My NT marriage video. Counselling. I don't think we would have got as far as we have, or as well as we have, without the assistance of experts. Because I found my husband impossible to reason with. Everybody says that Aspies have great logic, and I disagree. Okay, they've got smarts in, numbers and whatever their passion and their skill set is. But logic, no. Having dealt with my husband for 24 years, unequivocally disagree. He's not logical at all. You cannot reason with him. Nothing makes sense to him or gets through to him. He'll do something really sort of crappy, but if I do it, he'll yell. And to me, logically, I know that if you're doing it, you shouldn't be telling others off for doing it. But anyway, I couldn't reason with him. There was no amount of how I said it and which way I said it and all of that got through to him. He was so sure that he was right and I was wrong, and that I was the fault. I was the one causing all of the drama. I was the one causing all of the issues and the angst, and if not for me, the marriage would be great. And I knew that it just was not that black and white and not that simple. Couldn't get him to see it, hence we saw counsellors. However, not all counsellors are equal, and not all counsellors will help the marriage. In this particular case, we saw a counsellor named Terry, and she did more damage than she did good. We originally saw Terry because by this stage, we're talking about 3 or 4 years ago now, our children were starting to be depressed and having thoughts of suicide and things like this because their world just wasn't going well. And I'm not sure how much the marriage plays a part in their mental demise since I did my very, very best to shelter them from any of the sort of extreme behaviours and things. I think it was actually outside of us, peers and school and such. But nonetheless, we saw a counsellor. Well, rather, I rang up, is it Lifeline? Not Lifeline, Beyond Blue, who put us onto this place and to that place and this place and that place and da 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 da, and then eventually they said, call this lady. So I called her, and it turns out that she doesn't do family counselling and she doesn't specialise in ASD. But she had said to us that if she could get the marriage on track, then the family situation would fall into place and all would be well. So we saw her. And right from the get-go, I knew something was a little bit off because she was so sure that my family upbringing and trauma and tragedy and yada yada was shaping my beliefs in what my husband was doing. So she started off with, I said, he keeps telling me off. And she said, telling you off, that's an interesting turn of phrase. As though I was imagining that that's what was happening. Because in my mind, I view him as telling me off. And I was like, ooh, this is going to be tricky to explain to her that he really is telling me off. He really thinks that's his place. That he's the boss and I'm supposed to do what I'm told. When we saw Terry, we had a together session with her, then a one-on-one with her each. One-on-one with me, one-on-one with him. After that, she pulled us together and we had another session with her. And she was saying in that session that some test or questionnaire or something that she'd given me showed that I'm overly sensitive or highly sensitive. And I remember cringing at that point in time because that was what hubby had always said to me. Oh, you're just too sensitive. These things that I'm doing that hurt your feelings aren't really bad. You're just so sensitive they hurt your feelings. And so when she said that to me, I thought, yikes. Don't say that. You'll weaponize it. He'll weaponize it. Sure enough, we go home and he starts saying, yep, she agrees with me. You're too sensitive. I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just you. So we go back to the next session and I say to her, be careful what you say to him and what you tell him, because he uses it against me. And she goes, like what? And I said, you're too sensitive. And she said, well, you are overly sensitive. And I was like, lady, you've missed the point. And from then on, that was his go-to. So she ruined it in that sense, because every time he did something that bothered me or the children, he would just say, you're too sensitive, and Terry agrees with me. So that was already damaging from her part. She repeatedly told me that I was only triggered by past events, such as my childhood. And she kept asking me, is that a thing that's bothering you now or something that's bothering you then? And I said, what do you mean? Like, of course I'm bothered by the thing that happened right now. And then I would explain to her, this is what happened right now. And yes, I'm bothered by it happening right now. But she had this idea that it only bothered me because of past history and past childhood. I could not get her to understand that in the case of my husband, my childhood is not playing a part. I mean, yes, we all bring our childhood into our adulthood and it does shape us, but I wasn't sitting there and imagining that he was being verbally abusive just because I had parents who yelled. I knew he was being verbally abusive, and I just couldn't get her to see that, and therefore I couldn't get her to explain it to him. So we had this big situation of the elephant in the room is his rage and his temper and his anger, and whatever in the hell is causing that anger. But like all of the counsellors we'd seen to date, none of them had focused on that. So Counsellor Jeff, for example, our first counsellor, had said to me, can't you just adapt your behaviour? You gotta be joking. Yeah, look, if it was that easy, nobody's husbands or wives would be hitting them. Duh. Made me so angry. Like you said, can't you just not put a candle in the windowsill so that your husband doesn't fly into a rage? No problem, Jeff. So I'd move the candle. Didn't matter where I put the candle. Middle of the dining table, on a mantle. He was still raging about candles because he has a fear they're going to fall down and start a fire. And it was the same with Terry. She had actually said to me, can't you just not XYZ in order to trigger him? And I had a moment then where I almost stood up, you know, like aggression. I almost stood up and was like, Jesus. And instead I just kind of leaned forward and I said to her, of course I can just not do that thing. But you're not understanding me. It doesn't matter if I don't do that thing. He finds other things to rage about. And this was really bothering me by this stage, that all these counsellors were just ignoring what I was telling them. It was like they just didn't believe that he was as bad as I said he was. And I found out from Terry that because he's quiet in the sessions, and I'm not, I'm the one who does the talking and talking about all the situations that are happening, I looked like the volatile one. And it's really interesting in saying that, because when we go to our counselling sessions, he's so quiet, he practically has no complaints, and he has no complaints because nothing's happening to him. I'm not doing anything to him. And I've said this before in my counselling videos, I'm not insulting him, I'm not putting him down, I'm not flying into rages, I'm not mistreating him, I'm not badgering him or nagging him or any of the things that other couples have going on in their marriage. But I was in a situation where he was very controlling, and if I didn't do what I was told, he would yell like a parent and try to bully me into doing things his way. But because we're sitting in a session and I'm the one doing the talking and he's sitting there quietly with no complaints, I looked wild, crazy. And Terry would often tell me I need to learn to self-soothe. And that again is ludicrous, because all I've ever done in this relationship is self-soothe. Anybody who's with a neurodiverse will know they're not going to help you soothe. They don't have the capabilities to help you through whatever drama or malady you're going through. So I had to self-soothe. I had been self-soothing right from the start. And be it me screaming into a pillow or punching up my bed or turning my music on really loud so that the bass is just drowning out all thoughts, I had always learned to self-soothe. But I found it really interesting that she'd never said to him self-soothe. But again, she didn't think what I was telling her about him was real. So I don't know if you recall from another video, I talked about how we'd gone to a gathering of his, and at the end of the gathering, we'd done the funky, and then at the end of that, he started telling me that he was really appalled by my behaviour. And I was miffed, because we just had sex, you know, and if you're intimate with your partner, you don't imagine they're gonna have at the end of that session a go at you. And he was telling me things that I hadn't done. And he had already spoken to his friends to find out that they didn't agree that I was badly behaved. And when we go and see Terry, I was explaining to her that situation. And I said to her, I have a very big concern because he's inventing things that didn't happen. I said to her, that's like some sort of paranoia or something. That's beyond the scope. And instead of sort of turning to him and saying, yes, why were you inventing things that didn't happen to tell her off about? She'd actually said to me, well, can't you just behave better? And Lord, I wish I was kidding. It's like, Jesus, lady, you cannot be serious. And he made me really angry then, because he'd already spoken to his friends prior to us going to the counselling session, and they had already told him that what he thought happened hadn't happened. And he didn't say anything to her. He told it all like his friends and he had never spoken, and that I'd been this really embarrassing person. And he was saying that I was embarrassing because I'd had a few drinks, and she'd said to me, well, can't you just not drink? Geez, if drinking was the issue, I would have stopped long ago. In fact, him being him is what drives me to drink in the first place. He just gets so frazzled, you know. And I said to her, of course I could not drink. I said, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I do. He tells me off for laughing too much. He tells me off for eating too much. He tells me off for being quiet. It doesn't matter what I say or what I do. He finds a reason to tell me that I didn't behave well enough at social gatherings. And then we were talking about my drinking, and she said something about, you know, I think you're an alcoholic or something. And I went to her, oh my God, I'm not an alcoholic. And she goes, I think you are. And I was like, well, now you're really overstepping some counsel boundaries here, because you can't make that claim about me. You don't know me well enough to make such an assumption. In point of fact, the last time I'd been drunk was 2 years ago. And prior to that, it was 2 years before that. So that is not an alcoholic. An alcoholic is somebody who drinks all the time to oblivion. Or when they start drinking, they can't stop, or something. Getting drunk every couple of years does not make me an alcoholic. So the fact that she said that really pissed me off, to be honest. I was very angry. After that session, we came home and I put his toothbrush and his pillow and his pyjamas or whatever outside the bedroom door and locked the bedroom door so that he couldn't come in. So I was pretty much saying to him, you're not sleeping in this room with me tonight. I want to be alone. And I turned my music up really loud and I was pacing backwards and forwards and screaming through my teeth, you know, kind of like and screaming into a pillow and punching up the bed. I was ropeable. I was so angry at her and at him for letting her say and do and for lying, because he knew that I wasn't a problem at the party, yet he'd still gone to the counselling session and told her he had a problem with how I'd behaved at the party. So I was really, really, really angry. After I calmed down and came out of the bedroom, I said to him, I actually need you gone for the weekend. I can't be around you. I can't have you near me. I'm that angry. I just don't want to have anything to do with you. And so he left for a couple of days. I think he went to stay with a friend. I can't remember where he went. And so you can see she was making things worse. She never asked him, why are you thinking she's doing things she hasn't been doing? She just assumed that he was correct in his assumptions of me and that I had been doing these things and that I was the one who needed to pull my head in. She had also talked to me about how assuming what your partner is thinking is a sign of control. So let's go back a little bit and remember the situation where I'd asked him if he thinks I'm beautiful and he just stood there looking at me. And I said, oh my God, you don't. And he just shrugged. According to Terry, me assuming that he means that I'm not is me being controlling. I'm putting a thought in his head that he hasn't necessarily said that he has. Fair point. I mean, I can take that on board. Let me ponder that next time it happens. But then she starts talking to him about how he must be walking on eggshells because of my alcoholism. And I thought, well, isn't that just you being controlling? Because you're now assuming something that my husband hasn't told you he feels. And to prove my point, we get in the car and I say to him, walking on eggshells, hey? And he says, I don't feel that way. And I said, I know. That's why I'm so angry. Because you're sitting there letting her say that you are walking on eggshells and you're not disagreeing. But that being said, in his defense, he struggles to find ways to communicate. So when she's talking to him about that, he's struggling to find the words and the sentences and whatever it is that he needs to say to her, no, I don't feel that way. So he struggles in these counselling sessions to think of ways to respond to her when she asks him questions. Like she'll say to him, and how did you feel about that? And she's asking him about an event that happened weeks ago. And he can't tell me how he felt that morning, let alone 3 weeks ago. And I don't begrudge that about him. I've learned that that's how he works. But because he couldn't give her an answer, she started making up answers for him. And that's one of the things that really bothered me about her. I just thought that's super unethical. She had referred to me as contemptuous. She kept saying, you're full of contempt. So I would say, I don't like having phone calls with him when he calls me from work. I find the conversations boring. And she would say, that's speaking about your husband with contempt. And I was kind of like, all right, I can kind of think about that and take that on board a little bit, because I don't want to be contemptuous. And if she says it's there, then perhaps it is. But at the same time, she just didn't understand the dynamic. She didn't understand that I've been having these work conversations with him phone conversations for 15 years. And for 15 years we talk about perfunctory things. He doesn't ask me, like a flirty question, what are you wearing? I mean, he will now because I've kind of kept reminding him. But we don't talk about sex, for example, or anything really fun or playful. It's just, how was your day? How was my day? What did you have for dinner? What did I have for dinner? And I find the conversations mundane. And I have tried all manner of things with him to get the conversations to be different, and it isn't working. So I have gotten to the point where I sometimes don't want to talk to him because I find the conversations boring. And for her to be saying it was contemptuous, I thought, I feel like you just haven't understood the backstory. It was not like I just decided I was going to be really rude and say this rude statement. There's years and years and years and years worth of phone calls behind my statement. But because Terry didn't specialise in ASD, she just didn't understand the dynamic that we were going through. And with regards to that social gathering that we'd gone to, I had stopped going to social gatherings with him because of how he reacts after the social gatherings. I'd only gone because Terry had said that I was stonewalling, and that is withdrawing from the marriage and shutting him out. And so I thought, oh, okay, I'll be a good little wife and go to this gathering. And then it blew up in my face. And then we go to a counselling session, and the counsellor uses it against me, and I was like, it's like the Twilight Zone. Is this really happening? I was gobsmacked. One thing I have found with counsellors is that unless they do specialise in ASD, they can't really give you helpful tips and tricks because they don't know how the Aspie mind works. So she had given us, for example, homework. We had to sit with each other for 10 minutes a day and talk because we had brought up the lack of connection. But I found when I did talk to him for those 10 minutes, and he would set himself an alarm to make that happen, otherwise it didn't happen. If he didn't set himself a reminder, and then I said to him we need to talk for 10 minutes, it wouldn't be the right 10 minutes, so it wouldn't happen. It had to be him setting himself a reminder. I've got this time free, I'll go and talk to her, which is fine, it worked. But we would have these 10-minute conversations about nothing. And so you didn't feel more connected. You just felt like you'd gone up to a stranger on the street and said, how's the weather? And Terry didn't understand that. We did the homework and we go back and we talk to her. And she couldn't understand why it wasn't making me feel better. She couldn't understand why I wasn't feeling more connected. Like, you're talking with each other for 10 minutes, shouldn't this be good? But again, if you don't specialise in what condition my husband has, you don't know that those 10 minutes are going to be 10 pointless minutes. Because we weren't discussing anything real. We couldn't discuss anything real. Anytime I bring up an actual issue with my husband, it turns bad. We can't actually converse about it. And sex is a great example. If I say to him, our sex life isn't going very well, he mentally breaks down. It's overwhelming to him. He gets upset, he gets annoyed, he gets bothered, he can't fix it, and he just wants to leave. So he'll either shut down, melt down, or want to leave and end the marriage. So we can't talk about anything good or deep anyway. And she didn't understand that. She just thought those 10 minutes a day were going to bring us closer. She was also the one that put us onto the card decks. Actually, no. Sue had talked about the card decks, and then Terry had reiterated that we should be doing these card decks. And I'd said to her, they don't work. They still are not bringing us closer. And she'd said I was being contemptuous again. And again, I was thinking, lady, you just don't understand who and what you're working with here. And if you watch my card deck videos, you'll see why. Because he didn't instigate it, I instigated it. And if the whole problem of my marriage is that I have to instigate everything, giving us homework that I have to instigate is not going to work. And she didn't understand that. Terry also had us do that. I feel when this happens and what I need from you is. Now, I'm not sure how familiar that is to you. For anybody who's done counselling, this might be familiar. For those who haven't, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But you're supposed to say, I feel sad when I'm attacked at the social gathering, and what I need from you is. And again, that doesn't work with somebody on the spectrum, because they don't retain conversations, they don't remember them, they're just not very good at remembering the thing that it is you said you need. They don't meet your needs very well in the first place, let alone if you give them another need. And not only that, he had already done the thing that I needed him to stop. So for example, I might say, I feel really depressed when I'm yelled at. What I need from you is to not yell at me. Simple enough sentence, way harder to implement because nobody has ever gotten to the bottom of why it is he's yelling in the first place. So it's a moot point. I can make that statement 50 times. It doesn't matter. He's going to yell because none of the counsellors have ever asked him why he's yelling. So that method didn't work. I ended up talking to her about that and saying, look, this method isn't working for us because he's already gone off. He's already had his little hissy fit and yelled and ranted and raved. And we're all now feeling really because of it. And so the I feel and what I need is irrelevant. We're already high strung. Which leads me on to another thing. She asked me what we do when he yells. And I said, we pretty much run to our rooms and lock the doors. And she said to me, oh, so you're teaching your children to stonewall as well? I was like, ah! This isn't happening. And I said to her at this point in time, we had a one-on-one without him. I said to her, I need a one-on-one with you. And I said to her, if he was hitting me, would you be telling me that I'm overreacting and that I'm too sensitive and that it's all based on my childhood and not on the now? And she said, no. I said, then why are you doing the same with verbal abuse? Why are you so sure that I'm imagining it? If he was hitting me, you wouldn't think I was imagining it. And she kind of rolled her eyes at me then, and I thought, lady, that's just not okay. Why are you treating me this way? And in that session, I'd said to her, I have a feeling that you don't believe what I'm telling you. And that's when she said, from her experience, couples are much worse outside of the counselling sessions. So what she does is she watches couples in the counselling sessions and then assumes that whatever is happening is 10 times worse behind the scenes. So in other words, she was saying that she thinks that I am 10 times worse behind the scenes because I was the one bringing up the issues, and she felt that I was contemptuous and overly sensitive and all this kind of stuff. So she's pretty much admitted to me that she thinks I'm the cause of it. I'm the thing that is the problem because I'm 10 times worse than I am in those counselling sessions. Whereas he's sitting there, calm as your farm, saying hardly anything, and so he looked like the victim. He looked like this demure, soft, sweet man who wouldn't hurt a fly. And I looked eccentric. And I said to her, you don't understand. the reason that I'm speaking to you in these counselling sessions the way that I am is because I'm safe enough to do so. At home, there's no such thing like that. I can barely say any of this to him because he just gets so upset if I try to work out an issue with him. So I'm talking about them with you in these sessions because it's the safest place for me to do so. So yeah, that was very concerning to hear from her that she actually thought I was the issue. That was, I don't think I've ever been in that boat before. It was very disheartening. In one of our sessions, she'd asked me, or us, what is something that's happened in the past that we struggle to get over? And he didn't have something, doesn't surprise me, but I did. I said to her, when he said I would respect you more if you'd achieved something with your life, I said to her, that really, really hurt. That upset me. And she turns to my partner and she asks him, what made you say that? This is 2 odd years ago that he'd said this. It wasn't a recent thing. He wouldn't remember what we were doing, how the conversation come up, anything like that. He's got no memory of it. And she said to him, and boy, I wish I was joking again, she said to him, it must have been because you were arguing and she triggered you, right? And I was like, what? You weren't even there. You haven't even asked me what, how, why, when. You've just made this random assumption that I have attacked him, and that was his return statement. And I was just thinking to myself, as a counsellor, you're not allowed to do that. Just make stuff up. Anyway, I said to her, that's not at all what happened. We had been talking about how he doesn't respect me. And prior to that statement, he'd said, I don't respect you enough to meet your needs. And then I'd said something like, you know, what the hell, ouch, or something. And that's when he'd said, I would respect you more, you know, yada yada. So we hadn't been arguing, and perhaps I had said something that triggered him, because obviously he's making these statements, he feels triggered. But again, she needs to get to the bottom of what it is that makes him make these statements and what triggers him. And again, she was not focusing on what actually triggers him. She was just assuming that I was triggering him because I spoke, or we were arguing, which were her words. I triggered him because we were arguing. I imagine she had this vision of me going, and then he's turned around and said some cutting remark. That's what she thought happened. But that's not how conversations go with us. I will calmly say, I feel XYZ, like, I feel like we don't talk often enough, or I don't feel like we communicate, or I feel like the sex could do with some improvement. And then we can't just have a conversation about that because he struggles to find the words and the way to explain it and all of that sort of thing. But with a lot of his remarks, he just comes straight out and says random shit like that, like, I don't respect you enough to meet your needs. He's just random like that. He'll just throw stuff out there. So he doesn't insult me, like say, you're a bitch or a mole or anything like this. He doesn't use words as a weapon per se, but he will attack and say hurtful things like that. And he's doing it for who knows why, what reasons, what motive he has. And again, this is where I get so upset with the counsellors, because none of them to date have ever helped me with that. So in the end, we stopped seeing her because it was actually making things worse. And right at the end of seeing her, we had that rifle incident, which I made a video about. And after that, because he'd been talking with her and she was telling him I was too sensitive and condescending and contemptuous, blah, 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 blah. He had turned around to me and said, this is normal. It is normal for people to speak to each other in marriages this way. And I was thinking, well, firstly, if it's normal, why are you the only one doing it? Why am I not doing it? Like, if it's normal for people to yell, then should I just not be yelling all the time? And if I was yelling all the time, would you like that? Would you be thinking, oh, but it's normal, it's okay, you can yell at me? Again, this is where I get with the logic. I just think that's not logical. And so that's when I'd said to him, look, this may be your normal. I don't know where you got that from, who gave you that idea, but it's never going to be my normal. I don't want to be yelled at as part of my normal everyday life. And so I said to him, you need to pack your bags and go if that's what you're thinking. And so he left and we separated again. I don't know how many times it is by now, 4 or 5 times. And so that was how the counselling sessions had gone. She hadn't fixed anything, she'd made things worse. She never discussed his anger, she never discussed his rage. She didn't even believe me when I was telling her it was happening. And so we split up after seeing her, and then we stopped seeing her. And the irony with stopping to see her was that she'd actually called us up and said she had some sort of emergency. Excuse me. She had some sort of emergency and she needed to cancel our meeting. And then she never got in touch with us again. And that was how the sessions ended. And look, I wasn't bothered by that. I was glad to not be seeing her. She was making me feel crazy and frustrated because she hadn't helped. And in the end, it hadn't been this situation at all where she said if she'd fixed our marriage it would help our children. It didn't, because she was not very good at listening to me and what I was telling her. I'd even said to her, look, our children are as equally as frustrated and scared by him as I am. It's not all in my head. I'm not making it up. Anyway, with regards to the children, they somehow managed to get counselling through their school. I can't remember what happened. Something happened with one of them at school and the teachers called me in and they said, we're going to be giving them counselling sessions because we've noticed they're a bit sad. And I was like, bring it on. And they had their counselling sessions at school and they were better. So in the end it kind of sorted itself out outside of her. Point being, of course, to this video is that not all counsellors are good. Not all counsellors are going to work. Not all counsellors understand your decision, your situation. And counsellors come into it with their own bias. And this is the biggest issue with all things in life. If you have certain personality traits, or certain beliefs, certain upbringings, you bring that into your counselling sessions. And so Terry might have thought that she would just be able to come into this counselling session and if we would just all be more like her, all would be well. But she didn't have any experience in trauma or PSD or Cassandra or even verbal or family violence. She didn't have any sort of skill set or knowledge in that. And so from her perspective, she had no understanding whatsoever of what it was like to be in a relationship with somebody who verbally abuses you. And verbal abuse is so hard to see because it's not like a punch to the face and you've got a bruise. It's a punch to the gut verbally and there's no scar, there's no wound, there's nothing. The wound is in here and nobody can see it and nobody believes it and there's nothing, or it feels like there's nothing you can do about it. So unfortunately for us, we had this counsellor who just didn't have any experience in that, never got to the actual problem, which is what was causing his rage, and also what was causing him to constantly want me at these events that he wants me to go to, yet fault find me when I'm there at them. Like, not while I'm there, but afterwards. What makes him do that? Why be so insistent that I come to these events with you, like a work do or a family gathering or friend gathering, barbecue, whatever the situation, and then be so insistent that I was so badly behaved? I'll give you an example of that actually. We were at my family gathering, just a small little gathering with a few cousins and boyfriends and such, kids running around and having a good old time. And the guys were good. They stayed relatively sober, having a few beers and such. But the hostess was mixing drinks and making cocktails and all manner of fang-dangle things. And so us ladies, literally, we just got wrecked. There's just no other way to say that. We were just gone. But we were having a marvellous time. We were safe. We were in a backyard. We had men around us to keep us safe. There was nothing bad going to happen. And the next day, he's angry with me and starts telling me that I was being racist and saying all these things. And I've never been a racist. And I was just thinking, who on earth are you talking about? And it's not as though I would suddenly be drunk and some racism in me that I never felt in the first place it's going to just come to the surface. And I was saying to him, that did not happen. And he says, of course, how would you know? You were drunk. You can't remember what happened. And he probably had a point in a sense. I mean, I remembered, if you know what I mean, but you don't fully remember everything that happened. Anyway, so of course I've called my cousins, whose partners were there who were sober, and said, did I say XYZ and do this thing and say that thing and yada yada? And they've gone, no, what? And that was, you know, eye-opening for me and them, because they realised that here's this guy who's sitting there with everybody, acting normal, acting like he's having a good old time along with the rest of us. But as soon as we get home and we're behind closed doors, he's agitated with me and telling me off, but telling me off for things that didn't happen. And that to me is mind-boggling. Like, why and how is he imagining these things? And again, nobody gets to the bottom of that, because I wasn't believed that it was even happening. According to Terry, I should just not drink. And then all would be well. Anyway, that was our counsellor Terry. Big fat old disaster. So, I'll leave it over to you. Have you had counsellors who have done more damage than they've done good? Comment below, love to hear from you, and as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video.